I'm William O'Flaherty, and welcome to a special extended edition of 90 Seconds to Knowing C.S. Lewis. Not long ago, I was a guest on the Believe to See podcast from the Ansem Society that is based out of Colorado Springs, Colorado. That interview was about 45 minutes. I received permission from them to share some highlights. Follow the link in the description below to hear the complete show. What follows is slightly more than one-third of the interview that focuses on my book, The Misquotable C.S. Lewis.
Why are there so many fake quotations about Lewis floating out there?
Lewis is very quotable. He says some very concise things in his writings, but then, like some people, they build up to a point and then they make a summary, and without the context, it's not so good. And then so sometimes people try to remember, they're trying to honor him, and they share what they remember, or they see someone else claiming it's a quote by Lewis, and then they don't try to confirm it. In fact, just before we started recording, I was looking at a quote book called The Book of Quotations for People Who Hate Quotations. And in their preface, they say, while we've tried to confirm the accuracy of these quotations and attribute them correctly, this book is hardly a definitive guide, And then it says, the quotes may be inaccurate, misattributed, or completely misrepresented. So please don't use this as a resource for figuring out. It's like, this is a book of quotations. I guess we should say at least they're honest, but, so if you can't trust the book of quotations, who can you trust?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, goodness. So you've been in sort of the C.S. Lewis space for a while now. Like you said, your website been going for 10 years or so. Have you noticed different waves of fake C.S. Lewis quotations coming and going, or has it been consistently the same amount of fake quotations?
Well, there are some pretty common ones that keep coming up that it's just very, very annoying. And some of them, the quotes in and of themselves are pretty nice, but then, just don't say that Lewis said it. But then, a lot of people don't take the time to create their own meme. There's one about change. You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. Nice quotation. Lewis didn't say it.
And I've heard that one.
Yeah. But then here lately in 2020, sometime in March, someone posted something that is not at all in the style of the Screwtape Letters. Snoops.com actually tracked down the actual person who wrote it. And then someone else somehow stamped Lewis's name on it. And so that created a big interest.
Yeah.
And then here in the month of June that we're recording, and I learned of and only tracked it down to the month before, another one that claims to be from the Screwtape Letters, and it's not. And then that one has been a very popular article. We were talking before the show that I was surprised that even though the first one earlier in the year was pretty popular, it has, I think, around 25,000 views itself, but then that's been since the end of March. This one, less than a week after it was posted, had over 30,000. In fact, it stands now at 37, and that's only after like 7.5 days. And so we'll see. It seems like even though people have been reading the article, I've had some people I noticed this morning commented on Facebook. They were sharing my article, and that it is on my website, that, they keep seeing it. In fact, one other venture I started doing not that long ago, actually this year in 2020 earlier, is 90 Seconds to Knowing C.S. Lewis, a YouTube channel that sometimes I do a special edition. It's more than 90 seconds, but this one I did try to just make it at 90. And I focused on those two fake Screwtape Letters as well as one from 2016, and just said, hey, people, this is not Lewis.
So one of the things about your book, the Misquotable C.S. Lewis, that I found really interesting is you had sort of a list of, several common misquotations, and you have sort of show your notes on the research of it, but you categorize them according to the type. And you had like the totally false or sort of paraphrased, or so that's trying to get the different varieties of it. Can you talk a little bit about how you decided to categorize the misquotations?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the way this came about is when I first started to write about it on my website, essentialcslewis.com. This was in early 2014. I did an article called Quotes Not by C.S. Lewis, a Preliminary Examination. as I was collecting these, which I had several people encourage me to explore it, that was noticing things, and then I started collecting it. And we'll talk about how I actually verified here, I guess, in a second. But as I was tracking these down, I kind of noticed there was somewhat of a pattern. And so I decided to label them as not C.S. Lewis, almost C.S. Lewis, and not quite C.S. Lewis. The not ones are those that are falsely attributed to him. He didn't write it. And as far as we know, the author is not claiming to be paraphrasing Lewis. There's one exception that I've never been able to confirm that seems to be a very good paraphrase of Lewis, but it falls into the not because we know who the author is. We don't always know who the author is, but in this one case, we definitely do. And then the almost ones are the paraphrases, which range. If I were to rewrite my book or have a second edition, I would tweak this category and maybe still call it the same, but I would maybe note kind of a rough statistic. That is, some of them in there, and I do note that there are some that are very minor alterations of quotes, well-meaning people that summarized Lewis either in talk or in print, and they didn't go back and verify it. And so some are like, we'll say 95% accurate or 90. That's not too bad. And then some are a little bit more loose with it. And then some are not so close. And so that one has a range. And then the not quite are the ones that are out of context. That is, you will find the words in Lewis. However, isolated, the full meaning of what he's saying is really taken away by just isolating it. Now, if you were given a talk and you want to share ones that I, put in the not quite category, hey, I'm not going to lose any sleep because you have an opportunity to elaborate on it. But on a meme, it kind of loses the full meaning of it and could be misunderstood. So that's how I came up with the categories.
That's great. That's great. And it is really helpful when we get down into it. The ones that I found were especially suspect. I mean, like you said, some of these, it does seem to be a person like, they either like copied it down wrong or they're quote writing it from memory. They seem generally well-meaning. Others, it's like, did you just write this yourself and slap C.S. Lewis on it? And others, they're taken completely out of context. The one that I remember seeing in your book was the one where you'll probably know this better than me, but you're talking about there can be no great knowledge achieved without sacrifice or something. It sounds like, we need to take risks and break things for the cause of knowledge. But when you look at it, it's like, yes, C.S. Lewis said that, but it was the evil uncle in The Magician's Nephew when he's talking about why he sent Polly off into the netherworld. So it's like, maybe we shouldn't use that as a legitimate C.S. Lewis quotation. Were there other like really egregious, out of context examples that you can recall?
Well, that one you are recalling it accurately. I would maybe be able to say everything about it that I'm going to say in a quick comment, unless I'm actually opened my book and looked at it. But as you know, it's just said by an evil character to justify why he's not going to do something, but someone else should sacrifice, for him instead. But there are several that sound like a nice, good summary of things, but they don't quite go far enough. Like there are a few other ones that actually come from the movie with Narnia.
Oh, but, that makes sense.
One of them is hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny. That sounds nice. Reepicheep says it during the scene where Eustace has become a dragon, and Reep is trying to comfort him. But it's not Lewis. It's a very touching scene. But if you were to analyze the quote, it's like, hardships. People still have to make good choices, though, during that hardship. So that one, maybe if Lewis tried to say something along those lines, the fuller context would elaborate more as to, a better expression. And then another one from the movie, you doubt your value, don't run from who you are. And so, let's see, that one seems to be, self-affirming, but isolated. The quote could mean a variety of things. Again, it's found in the movie version of The Voyage of the Dawn Treader as well.
Do you find, like, as you do this work, do you have like a spider sense with something like, I don't think that's him. That doesn't smell right.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, like, there's a couple other ones we mentioned real quick, and that is Getting over a painful experience is much like crossing monkey bars. Let go to move on. That one is nowhere near Lewis at all. But
it doesn't sound like him at all.
No, not at all.
Exactly. So that's not in any movie. We can talk about Shadowlands here in a second. There are some quotes attributed to Lewis that was said in the movie, but they're not Lewis. This is screenwriter should be given credit, and it may or may not be the best summary of Lewis's beliefs. But as I was researching that one, I came across the expression "monkey bars." Was first used in 1929. Lewis was born in 1898, and so he would not have been familiar with that expression. I want to say jungle gym, but I think I was doubtful as to if that was his expression or not. But that's not the point as to what his expression was. It's just the one that's used in this quote definitely wasn't him. And then there's another one: be weird, be random, be who you are, because you never know who would love the person you hide. It's like, really? Weird and random.
I know.
And he said that was C.S. Lewis?
Yeah. Weird and random would have had a different meaning. Lewis died in 1963. Some of your listeners may be aware of this already, but some aren't. And that is, he died the same day Kennedy died. And so weird and random would have had different meanings. More contemporary, it can have, some positive aspect, but either way, Lewis would not say that. If you really meditate on that quote, it's like you could justify anything. I'm being weird. I'm being random because I don't know who's going to love this person.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, really, people?
I'm just trying to close my eyes and picture, Evangeline, to try to do this. Close your eyes and picture C.S. Lewis saying weird, random, and monkey bars. I can't do it.
I can't do it either, no.
So that gets me into the issue, like, Evangeline, do you, again, me and you follow a lot of the same writers, and a lot of writers, part of their, internet presence is posting, this pithy quotation on Instagram with like a picture of like a lake or a flower or something in the background. Do you do that, Evangeline?
I do, and I've been actually thinking about this a lot since we were talking about posting quotes, and you only have so much space. And so you're reading along in this passage and something stands out to you. And, so you put it up on your Instagram, whatever, you make a pretty graphic. And now I'm all convicted. What have I put out there that isn't representing what the author meant? And I realize I've done this. And I'm also having this overall frustration with how we do pick out those little snippets and share them. And there's just only so much. It hits the heart. It's like, oh yeah, I identify with that. But there's so much more beneath the surface that we're missing. And we've done ourselves a disservice in not investigating further. But it's just the culture of the time. It's so
Are you
easy.
saying I'm making you it sounds like I'm making you paranoid. It's like some regards. But
I am. I'm like, when have I done this? Oh, I've done this.
Well, when I started my website, Essential C.S. Lewis, I mentioned I did a blog that was a quiz. Then I started to do a fact and as well as a quiz and then a quote. And so I went to other Lewis websites and then other places. They have a list of 100 best or my 15 favorite Lewis quotes. And so I actually shared a few on my website before really taking the time. It wasn't because I was, trying to deceive anyone. It's, somewhat lazy, but then it's like, if someone shared a quote by Shakespeare, Einstein, or Lincoln, and I read it and I go, oh, wow, that's pretty neat. I'm going to share it because I agree with it. I don't know if they said it. I don't have Shakespeare memorized, or Lincoln or Einstein. And then even with Einstein, a lot of Christians will quote Einstein saying, God doesn't play dice, which I don't remember if that's the accurate quote or not. But for the point of our discussion here, it's like, we'll use a quote because it confirms something we already believe. And that's why people often share a quote, is it confirms something that they already believe to be true. And so here is some other respected person that says it, that, we're going to share it because it carries more weight.
Is there one quotation floating around attributed to C.S. Lewis that really just sort of gets to you like, he never would have said that. That's not the C.S. Lewis sentiment. Why is this going around all?
Let me say the quote first, and then pause dramatically to let it sink in. And people go, yeah, Lewis probably would have said that, right? Quote, education without values, as useful as it is, seems rather to make a man a more clever devil. Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, well, no, wouldn't Lewis say that? But then this was early on in my research, and while I had read Lewis, I've read him a lot more since then. And so the late Dr. Bruce Edwards, who passed away several years ago, this was before he passed away, I sent him an email because someone had asked me about it, and I was like, I can't seem to find it, and I hadn't honed my skills. And frankly, to be honest, I was lazy. I thought, let me send a message to someone who knows the material better than me, and it'll save me some research. And I do give him full credit in the book. But so I emailed him, and then because it claimed to be like from one of Lewis's real books, The Abolition of Man. And I think at the time I may not have had a searchable copy. I do now. But anyway, he said that, quote, I don't even think it expresses truth. Neither Lewis nor I believe there is such a thing as education without values, which is how the quote starts, right? And then he goes on to say, in other words, it's the opposite of his argument in Abolition of Man. Why would Lewis say an education without values is useful? That's the beginning of the quote. Education without values, as useful as it is, no, it's not. And so, it's not Lewis. So that one really stands out. And I think since my book came out, there was some additional tracking down as to who actually said it, because in some cases we know who said the falsely attributed quote to Lewis. In some cases we don't. And then some, it's anonymous in terms of we know it's anonymous and it's not, but anyway, but yeah, that one just like,
Sorry to say, that's all of the interview from the Believe to See podcast that I'm sharing. I hope you enjoyed this special extended edition of 90 Seconds to Knowing C.S. Lewis. As noted at the start, you can hear the entire interview by following the link in the description below. Again, I'm William O'Flaherty, the creator of this show, and in addition to writing the Misquotable C.S. Lewis, I've also written an enhanced study guide to the Screwtape Letters called C.S. Lewis Goes to Hell. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and like this video and share it with others.